The emergency sirens had been silent for exactly 3 minutes when Relin realized her entire species might be extinct within a year. She sat in the council chamber while holographic displays showed red zones spreading across the galactic map like a disease. 47 colonies gone, not occupied, gone. The Ravagers didn't conquer worlds, they consumed them, breaking down everything into raw materials for their endless expansion. "We need soldiers," she said, her translator rendering her clicking mandibles into flat words. "Not diplomats, not scientists. Soldiers who can fight and win." High Speaker Drem shifted all 4 of his arms in what humans would call a nervous gesture. His species, the Miran, hadn't fought a war in 3,000 years. None of them had. The coalition existed because its member species chose cooperation over conflict. They built things. They explored. They talked. The Ravagers just killed. "The Terrans," someone said. Relin turned to see who spoke. It was Quilith Admiral Koss, his scaled face hard to read even after decades of working together. The new species from Sector 849. Their world is classified as a death world. Class 12. The room went quiet. Class 12 meant a planet that would kill most coalition species within hours. High gravity, temperature extremes, dangerous atmosphere, aggressive predators. Worlds where evolution ran on violence instead of cooperation. They might say no, Drem offered weakly. They might say yes, Relin countered. And if they do, we need to be ready for what that means. The vote took less than an hour. Desperation made them decisive. They would contact Earth and request military assistance. Relin wasn't sure if she'd just saved her people or doomed the galaxy to something worse than the Ravagers. 3 days later, Lina found herself stepping off a shuttle onto a human orbital station. She was young for a Quilith, barely 40 standard years, and she'd volunteered for this assignment because someone had to do it. The station maintained 0.8 standard gravity as a courtesy to visitors, but even that made her muscles ache. She couldn't imagine living under full Earth gravity. Through the viewports, Earth rotated below. It looked beautiful and terrifying. Massive oceans covered most of the surface. Clouds swirled in violent patterns. The atmospheric reading showed 21% oxygen, enough to cause toxicity in most coalition species after prolonged exposure. The humans breathed it like it was normal. "Officer Lina?" A voice made her turn. The human wore a military uniform, dark blue with incomprehensible symbols on the chest. She was shorter than Lina, but moved with an economy of motion that suggested coiled strength. "I'm General Brooks. Welcome to Gateway Station." Lina tried not to stare, but it was difficult. Humans looked strange to her eyes, forward-facing eyes like predators, flat faces with exposed teeth, skin instead of scales or chitin. Everything about them screamed danger to her evolutionary instincts. "Thank you for meeting with us," Lina managed. Her translator worked perfectly, but she still felt like she was missing something in the exchange. Brooks led her through corridors that felt too narrow and too warm. Other humans passed them, and Lina noticed they all moved the same way, balanced and ready, like they expected trouble at any moment. In the briefing room, more officers waited, all human, all watching her with those predator eyes. She explained the situation as clearly as she could. The Ravagers, the losses, the desperate need for troops who could fight. She showed them tactical data, casualty reports, projections that ended with coalition extinction within 18 months if current trends continued. "You want 5,000 soldiers?" Brooks said when Lina finished. It wasn't a question. "Yes, we can provide transport, equipment, supplies. We need experienced fighters who can train our forces and hold critical positions while we evacuate civilian populations." A younger officer leaned forward. His name tag read Hayes, and he had scars on his hands that Lina couldn't identify. "Frontline combat?" "Yes." "Enemy specifications?" Lina pulled up the data. Ravagers stood 3 meters tall, had armored carapaces that resisted most coalition weapons, and fought in coordinated swarms that overwhelmed defensive positions through pure numbers. Hayes smiled. Actually smiled. "When do we ship out?" Brooks shot him a look that made him sit back. But Lena saw the same expression on other faces around the table. They were eager. The coalition was facing extinction, and these humans were eager to fight. "We can have volunteers ready within the week," Brooke said. "But I need your medical staff to clear our biology for your life support systems first. And I want full tactical briefings on enemy patterns, coalition defensive doctrine, and supply chain logistics." "Of course," Lena said. Though she felt off balance, she'd expected negotiations, debates, concerns about casualties. Instead, the humans acted like she'd offered them an opportunity rather than asked them to die on alien worlds against an enemy that had crushed every coalition force sent against it. Dr. Tav arrived the next day, a Brancor medical specialist who'd worked with dozens of species. He was methodical and careful, exactly what Lena needed. The human volunteers submitted to every test without complaint. Tav took samples, ran scans, and reviewed the data with an expression that gradually shifted from professional interest to open alarm. "Their healing factor is impossible," he told Lena in private. "Broken bones mend in weeks instead of months. Wounds close faster than our equipment can measure. They have redundant organs, Lena. If one kidney fails, another takes over. Their pain tolerance is so high that our standard medical readouts classify them as perpetually injured. But they can work with our life support?" "Yes, but that's not the point. These beings evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. Their bodies are designed for survival under conditions that would be classified as torture for us." Tav's manipulator tendrils twisted anxiously. "What are we bringing into this war?" Lena didn't have an answer. She watched human soldiers training in the station's gym, moving through exercises that would hospitalize coalition troops. She saw two humans sparring, actually hitting each other, and when one got injured, they just laughed and kept going. Their entire culture seemed built around casual violence that they treated as normal. When the battalion boarded the coalition transports 5 days later, Lena stood in the docking bay and watched 5,000 humans march past. They carried personal items, photos of families, small mementos. They joked with each other and sang strange songs. They were people, not weapons. But she'd seen what they could do. She'd watched them train. She'd read Dr. Tav's reports about their biology. These weren't just soldiers. They were Deathworlders, beings who survived on a planet that should have killed them. And now they were coming to fight the galaxy's nightmares. As the last transport sealed its airlock, General Brooks appeared beside her. "Your people asked for reinforcements," the human said quietly. "I hope you're ready for what that really means." Lena watched the ships depart, carrying humanity's warriors toward the front lines. She hoped so too, but deep down, she wondered if the coalition had just traded one existential threat for another. The Ravagers might consume worlds, but the humans came from a world that consumed everything soft and left only the strong behind. The convoy jumped to faster-than-light speeds, and Lena filed her report to the council. She chose her words carefully, trying to convey both hope and warning. The humans were coming. The war was about to change. She just wasn't sure if that change would save the coalition or destroy everything they'd built. In the transport, Sergeant Hayes checked his rifle one more time and grinned at his squad. "Finally," he said, "some real action." Narenfur burned beneath a copper sky. Lena watched from the command center as landing craft descended through the smoke, carrying human soldiers toward a battle that had already killed 30,000 coalition troops. The planet had been an agricultural world once, home to 16 million Talvosi farmers who grew crystal grains in the mineral-rich soil. Now half the surface looked like open wounds, vast excavation sites where Ravager machines tore apart the bedrock itself. Commander Sorev stood beside her, all 7 feet of his insectoid frame rigid with tension. He'd held this position for 3 months, watching his forces slowly ground down by endless Ravager attacks. His troops were exhausted, undersupplied, and dying. The northern perimeter had collapsed twice in the last week. Each time they'd rebuilt it, and each time the Ravagers came back stronger. "Your humans are deploying to Sector 7, Sorev said, mandibles clicking in what Lena had learned to recognize as doubt. "The weakest point in our line. They'll be overrun within a day." Lena didn't argue. She'd thought the same thing. Sector 7 was a killing ground, a valley between 2 ridges where Ravager forces funneled through in waves. Coalition doctrine called for falling back to secondary positions when the pressure got too intense, but there were no secondary positions left. If Sector 7 fell, the Ravagers would reach the evacuation ships and another 16 million civilians would die. The first human boots hit dirt 20 minutes later. Lena watched through drone feeds as Hayes led his company off the landers, already assessing the terrain with those predator eyes. They moved fast, spreading out in patterns that made no sense to Coalition tactical doctrine. Instead of establishing a defensive perimeter, they pushed forward, claiming high ground and clearing fields of fire. "What are they doing?" Sorev asked. "They're supposed to reinforce our positions, not abandon them." "I think they're making new positions," Lena said slowly. She'd studied human military history during the flight, read accounts of their wars. Humans didn't like staying still. They attacked even when defending. Within an hour, Hayes had transformed Sector 7. His troops dug fighting positions with collapsible tools, set up interlocking fields of fire, and placed sensors that would give them advance warning of any approach. They worked like machines, efficient and tireless. Coalition engineers estimated 3 days to fortify a position like this. The humans did it in 60 minutes. "Incoming," a sensor operator announced. "Ravager advance force, approximately 2,000 units approaching from the northeast." Lena felt her breathing quicken. 2,000 Ravagers. Hayes had 300 humans. The math was impossible. "Should we send reinforcements?" Sorev asked. Before Lena could answer, Hayes's voice came through the command channel, rough and calm. "Negative on reinforcements. We've got this. Just keep the civilians moving." Sorev made a sound that Lena's translator couldn't render. Disbelief, maybe, or resignation. They watched the feeds as the Ravager force approached, moving in that horrible coordinated way that made them so effective. Individual Ravagers weren't particularly smart, but in groups they shared information, adapted tactics, became something greater than the sum of their parts. The humans opened fire at 800 meters. Coalition doctrine called for waiting until 400 meters to conserve ammunition, but the humans didn't seem worried about conservation. Their weapons barked in controlled bursts and Ravagers fell. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough to slow the advance, to disrupt their formation. At 600 meters, the humans switched tactics. Explosives arced through the air, detonating in clusters that threw Ravager bodies like toys. The advance staggered but kept coming. They always kept coming. At 400 meters, Lena expected the humans to fall back. Coalition troops always fell back at 400 meters. The Ravagers were too strong at close range. Their armored bodies and bladed limbs designed for brutal melee combat. The humans didn't fall back. They dug in and kept firing. At 200 meters, Ravagers reached the human positions. Lena watched in horror as the creatures crashed into the defensive line like a wave hitting rocks. Humans fought with rifles, knives, makeshift clubs, anything they could grab. She saw one soldier, Corporal Liu, holding a choke point between two barriers. 3 Ravagers came at him simultaneously. He shot 2, then used his rifle as a club when the third got too close. "They're going to be overrun," Sorev said. He was already signaling for evacuation ships, writing off Hayes's company as lost, but the humans held. They held when they should have broken. They held when coalition troops would have routed. They held because apparently dying wasn't enough reason to retreat. Liu fought with what sensors showed was a fractured leg. Other humans fought with injuries that should have rendered them unconscious. They just kept fighting. The Ravager assault broke after 2 hours, not because they were destroyed, but because their coordination algorithms couldn't adapt to an enemy that refused to follow predictable patterns. They pulled back to regroup, leaving 400 dead on the battlefield. Human casualties, 12 dead, 43 wounded. Impossible numbers. Lena checked the sensor data 3 times, certain there was an error. "Get medical teams to Sector 7, she said quietly. The coalition medics came back shaken. They'd treated human wounded before during the journey, minor training injuries, but this was different. Liu had fought for 2 hours on a broken leg. Another soldier had continued combat operations with 3 broken ribs. One human had been partially crushed by a Ravager and still managed to eliminate the target before accepting medical evacuation. How are they still alive? Dr. Tav demanded when he reviewed the reports. These injuries should be fatal. Their biology makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, Lena said, understanding settling over her like cold water. They evolved to survive. Not to be comfortable. Not to be safe. To survive, their bodies don't quit until there's no other choice. Over the next 3 weeks, the pattern repeated. Ravagers attacked. Humans held. Coalition forces, inspired by the example, started holding positions longer. Started pushing back instead of just defending. The front line stabilized for the first time in 6 months. Hayes's company took sector after sector, always pushing forward, never satisfied with holding ground. They fought at night, which terrified the Ravagers who relied on visual coordination. They fought in conditions that would slow coalition troops to a crawl. Heat and cold and terrain that seemed designed to kill. Lieutenant Reese led a reconnaissance team deep into Ravager territory, behind the lines where no coalition force had survived more than a day. They stayed 11 days, living off captured supplies, avoiding detection, mapping enemy positions. When they finally emerged, Reese's report included the locations of 3 major Ravager command nodes, targets that coalition intelligence had been trying to find for a year. "We could hit them," Reese said in the strategy meeting, pointing to the holographic display. "Take out their coordination centers. It won't end the war, but it'll cripple their offensive capability in this sector." "That's suicide," Sorev said flatly. "You'd need to penetrate 50 kilometers into hostile territory, bypass their defensive networks and assault-hardened positions. Even if you succeeded, you'd never make it out." Reese looked at Hayes, then at General Brooks, who'd arrived in system 3 days earlier. Something passed between them, some silent communication that Lena couldn't read. "With respect, Commander," Brooks said. "That's only suicide if you plan to fight your way through. We prefer the sneaky approach." Lena found herself in the command center when Brooks's assault team launched, 50 humans and 6 stealth insertion craft, heading straight into the heart of Ravager territory. The craft were coalition designs, never meant for combat insertion, but the humans had modified them with equipment Lena didn't recognize. Terran military technology, probably. Earth hadn't shared everything during the negotiations. "They'll never make it," Sorev said. He'd said it 4 times already, like a mantra. Lena didn't respond. She watched the signal indicators on the tactical display until they winked out one by one, as the insertion craft went to full stealth mode. No communications, no sensor emissions, no way to track them. 30 hours of silence followed. 30 hours where Lena wondered if she'd sent 50 humans to die. 30 hours where Sorev prepared casualty reports and Drem composed an apology to Earth's government. Then Ravager communications across 3 sectors went insane. Command nodes exploded simultaneously, their signature energy patterns vanishing from sensors in the space of 10 minutes. Ravager forces stopped their coordinated advances and started milling around like lost children. Their tactical cohesion shattered. 3 hours later, Brooks's voice came through the command channel, calm as if she'd just finished a training exercise. "Command, this is Strike Team 1. Mission accomplished. We're coming home." The humans emerged from Ravager territory on captured enemy transport craft, half of them wounded but all of them alive. They'd penetrated 50 kilometers into hostile space, destroyed 3 hardened command facilities, and escaped with 0 fatalities. Lena watched them disembark, saw them laughing and helping wounded teammates walk, treating the whole operation like it had been a minor inconvenience. These beings had just accomplished what Coalition Command had considered impossible, and they acted like it was just another day of work. That night she filed another report to the Council. The humans were everything they'd hoped for and everything they'd feared. They fought like demons, survived impossible odds, and somehow made it look easy. But they were changing the Coalition forces too, teaching them that retreat wasn't always necessary, that aggressive action could save lives. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in a year, Lena believed they might actually win. 3 months into the campaign, the Coalition had recaptured 8 colonies and pushed the Ravagers back across a front that hadn't moved in over a year. Lena stood in a reclaimed operations center on Veltros 2, looking at holographic displays that showed green zones instead of red for the first time since the war started. The change wasn't just about territory, it was about what the humans had taught them. Sergeant Hayes sat across from her, teaching a Talvosi soldier named Kren the words to something called a marching cadence. The human's voice was rough but rhythmic, and Kren's translator struggled with the concept of singing while walking. But the Talvosi was trying, his mandibles clicking in approximation of the melody. "Why do you sing when you march?" Kren asked. His species didn't really understand music the way humans did, Sound was for communication, not art. Keeps the mind focused, Hayes said. Gives everyone the same rhythm. Makes you feel like part of something bigger than yourself. He paused. Plus, it passes the time. Lina had been studying this phenomenon. Human soldiers bonded through shared hardship in ways coalition troops never did. They told stories, made jokes about terrible situations, created rituals that bound them together. A coalition squad was 5 individuals working toward a common goal. A human squad was something different, something that made them stronger than the sum of their parts. Contact, a sensor operator called out. Ravager probe force, Sector 9. Estimated strength, 400 units. Hayes was on his feet instantly, Kren scrambling to follow. We've got Sector 9, Commander. Permission to engage. Sorev, who'd learned to trust human judgment even when it seemed insane, simply nodded. Granted. Keep us updated. Hayes' squad moved out with a mixed coalition unit, 20 humans and 30 coalition troops working together. Lina watched through tactical feeds as they approached the Ravager position. The humans moved fast and low, using terrain for cover. The coalition troops moved more carefully, but they were learning. A month ago, they would have stayed in tight formation and advanced slowly. Now they spread out, moved deliberately, thought about angles of attack instead of just defense. The engagement lasted 40 minutes. The Ravagers fought like they always did, relying on numbers and coordination. But the mixed unit fought smarter, using human aggression and coalition precision together. When Hayes' team drew the Ravager force into a killing zone, it was Kren who triggered the trap. His Talvosi reflexes faster than any humans. 0 human casualties. 3 coalition wounded, none seriously. 400 Ravagers destroyed. 6 months ago, this would have been considered a miracle. Now it was just Tuesday. They're learning, Sorev said that evening, reviewing the tactical recordings. Your humans are teaching them to fight. Not fight, Lina corrected. The coalition always knew how to fight. The humans are teaching them not to be afraid of fighting. She'd noticed it in small ways at first. Coalition troops standing their ground a few seconds longer before retreating. Then a few minutes. Then not retreating at all unless tactically necessary. They watched the humans survive injuries that should be fatal, and realized that being hurt didn't mean being finished. They saw humans laugh in the face of danger, and learned that fear was something you acknowledged and then ignored. Lieutenant Reese had taken this to an extreme. His reconnaissance team now included 3 coalition members, volunteers who wanted to learn what he called deep recon. The last mission had lasted 17 days, probing Ravager supply lines and reporting back enemy movements. The coalition troops came back changed, moving with some of that human confidence, speaking in clipped tactical phrases they'd picked up from Reese. One of them was a Quilith scout named Morrow, who'd served in coalition military for 15 years before the war. Lina interviewed him after his 3rd mission with Reese. It's different out there with them, Morrow said, his scales rippling in what Lina recognized as excitement. We used to scout and report. Stay hidden, avoid contact, gather intel. The humans scout and adapt. If they find an enemy supply depot, they don't just report it. They destroy it and then report it destroyed. That's dangerous, Lina said. Everything's dangerous, Morrow replied, and Lina heard the echo of human philosophy in his words. But sitting still is more dangerous than moving. I used to think survival meant avoiding risk. The humans taught me that survival means managing risk. There's a difference. High Speaker Drem visited the front lines 6 weeks into the campaign. He spent 2 days touring reclaimed colonies, speaking with troops and observing the integrated units. Lina accompanied him, watching the Mirren leader's forearms gesture with increasing animation as he saw what the coalition forces had become. This wasn't what I expected, Drem said on the 2nd evening. They stood on a ridge overlooking a human encampment, where soldiers cleaned weapons, told stories, and prepared for the next day's advance. I thought the humans would fight for us. I didn't expect them to fight with us. They don't know how to do anything else, Lina said. Humans survived their homeworld by working together. They see us as part of their pack now. Pack, Drem repeated, testing the word. An interesting concept. We have alliances, agreements, mutual benefit arrangements. They have packs. General Brooks joined them a moment later, moving silently despite wearing full combat gear. Lina had stopped being startled by how quietly humans could move. They were predators, after all, and predators evolved to stalk. High Speaker, Brooks said with a nod of respect. What do you think of our progress? I think you've changed the war, Drem said carefully. But I wonder what else you've changed. The coalition was built on principles of careful consideration, diplomatic solutions, peaceful coexistence. Your influence pushes us toward aggression. With respect, Brooks said, you can't be peaceful with an enemy that wants to consume you. The Ravagers don't negotiate. They don't care about your principles. They care about resources and your resources. I know, Drem said quietly. That's what frightens me. We may need to become something we're not in order to survive. You don't have to become us, Brooks countered. You just have to be willing to fight for what you are. There's a difference between being peaceful and being weak. You're learning to be peaceful and strong. Lena watched Drem consider this. The Miran leader had survived 3 assassination attempts during peace negotiations with hostile species over his long career. He understood violence. He just hadn't embraced it the way humans did. I hope you're right, Drem finally said. Because if we become too much like you, we might save ourselves from the Ravagers only to become something our own people no longer recognize. The next major offensive targeted the Ravager stronghold on Kelos Prime, a fortress moon that served as their logistics hub for the entire sector. Coalition intelligence had classified it as impregnable. 40,000 Ravagers defended it, backed by automated defense systems and natural fortifications that made direct assault suicide. We're going to take it, General Brooks announced in the strategy meeting. Full combined assault. Human shock troops to breach the perimeter, coalition forces to secure the interior, mixed units to hold supply lines. That's impossible, a Brancor commander said. We'd lose half our forces just reaching the walls. Not with proper coordination, Brooks replied. She pulled up tactical displays showing approach vectors, fire support positions, and insertion points. We hit them from 3 directions simultaneously. Use their own tactics against them. Overwhelm their coordination with multiple threats. The planning took 2 weeks. Lena watched as human and coalition officers worked together, combining aggressive human tactics with coalition strategic thinking. The humans wanted to charge straight in. The coalition wanted to lay siege. The compromise was something neither side would have thought of alone. A lightning assault backed by overwhelming fire support and immediate consolidation. 15,000 troops launched the attack just before dawn. Lena watched from the command ship, her hands gripping the console as if she could somehow affect the outcome through sheer will. The first wave hit the Ravager perimeter with such force that the defenders couldn't coordinate their response. Human demolition teams blew gaps in the fortifications while coalition artillery hammered defensive positions. Kren fought alongside Hayes' squad, his Talvosi precision complementing human aggression. When a Ravager counterattack threatened to overwhelm their position, it was Kren who held the line, using suppressing fire with mechanical accuracy, while Hayes organized a flanking maneuver. The 2 soldiers had become something more than a human and an alien working together. They'd become a team, each covering the other's weaknesses, amplifying their strengths. The battle lasted 6 hours. Coalition forces pushed into the fortress with human support, clearing sections methodically while maintaining momentum. For the first time in the war, a major Ravager stronghold fell to direct assault. When the last defensive position surrendered, the human and coalition troops cheered together, their voices mixing in celebration. Final casualties: 400 human dead, 800 coalition dead. Terrible numbers, but less than half what Coalition Command had projected. And more importantly, the troops who survived had fought together, bled together, won together. They weren't just allies anymore. They were becoming something new. That night, Hayes taught Kren more human songs. This time victory songs about battles won and friends remembered. Other coalition troops gathered around, listening to these strange Deathworlders sing about death and valor and the bonds that held soldiers together. Lena filed her report to the council with shaking hands. The war was turning. The Ravagers were being pushed back, but the real change wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the hearts of coalition troops who'd learned that courage could be taught, that survival wasn't about avoiding danger but facing it together, that humans might be Deathworlders but they were also teachers, friends, and something the coalition had never really had before. Warriors who fought not for conquest but for each other. The war entered its 5th month, and Ravager forces retreated across 7 sectors simultaneously. They weren't surrendering, but they were adapting, changing tactics to counter the human-trained coalition armies. Lena noticed it first in the intelligence reports. Ravagers started avoiding direct confrontation, using hit-and-run tactics targeting supply lines instead of population centers. "They're learning from us," Reese said during the morning briefing. His reconnaissance team had just returned from a week-long patrol where they'd tracked Ravager movements. "They watch us adapt, so now they're adapting to our adaptation. It's like fighting a mirror." Commander Sorev studied the tactical displays with an expression Lina had learned to read as concern. The Talvosi had changed over these months, standing taller, speaking with more confidence, but he still understood the mathematics of war. If they're avoiding direct combat, they're buying time to regroup. "We need to press the advantage, or we need to figure out what they're regrouping for," Brooke said. She'd been studying Ravager psychology. What little they understood of it, the species didn't think like individuals. They thought like a collective, making decisions based on overall survival rather than personal preservation. They wouldn't retreat unless they had a reason. Ravagers don't fear death. They fear irrelevance. Hayes leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming on the table. "So what makes them relevant?" "Consuming resources," Dr. Tav answered. The Brancor had joined these tactical meetings months ago. His medical expertise surprisingly useful for predicting enemy behavior based on biological needs. "They need raw materials to reproduce, to build, to expand. We've cut off their access to easy targets. They're hungry." The word hung in the air like a threat. Hungry Ravagers were desperate Ravagers, and desperate enemies were dangerous. 2 days later, sensors detected a massive Ravager fleet massing near the abandoned colony of Threx 6. The world had been evacuated 4 months earlier, written off as indefensible. Now 300 Ravager vessels surrounded it, not attacking but waiting. "It's bait," Lina said immediately. "They want us to commit forces to retake it. Or they're preparing to harvest it completely," Sorev countered. "Threx 6 has significant mineral deposits. If they process the entire planet, they'll have enough resources to build a new fleet." The debate lasted hours. Human officers wanted to attack immediately, disrupt whatever the Ravagers were planning. Coalition Command wanted to observe, gather more intelligence, avoid rushing into a trap. Lina watched them argue, saw both sides make valid points, and realized this was what they'd lost when they recruited humans. The Coalition used to be cautious to a fault. Now they had warriors pushing them toward action. "We split the difference," General Brooks finally said. "Send a reconnaissance force to assess the situation. If it's a trap, we pull out. If it's a legitimate target, we call in the main fleet." Reese volunteered to lead the recon mission. His team had grown to 12 members now, 4 humans and 8 Coalition troops who'd trained under his methods. Mora was among them, the Quilith scout who'd learned to think like a human while maintaining his own species' precision. They launched in a modified Coalition stealth ship, approaching Threx 6 on a trajectory that would put them in sensor range without exposing them to direct detection. Lina monitored from the command center, watching their signal indicators creep closer to the Ravager fleet. "Something's wrong," Reese's voice came through after 6 hours of silence. "The Ravager ships aren't moving. They're just floating here, no patrol patterns, no defensive formations. It's like they're dead in the water." "Weapons status?" Brooks asked. "Powered down. Engines at minimum. I'm reading life signs inside the ships, but they're not doing anything. This doesn't make sense." Lina felt her scales prickle with unease. Ravagers didn't just stop. They were driven by biological imperatives that made rest a foreign concept. Something was very wrong. "Can you get closer?" Brooks asked. "Negative. We'd risk detection, but I can deploy a sensor probe." A pause. "Deploying now." The probe drifted through the Ravager fleet on thrusters so small they barely registered on sensors. Its data feed showed ship after ship in low power mode, Ravagers inside moving slowly, almost lethargically. "They're starving," Dr. Tav said suddenly. He'd pulled up biological data on his own terminal, comparing it to the probe's readings. "Look at the metabolic rates. They're in conservation mode. They can't find enough resources to sustain active operations. So they're waiting to die?" Hayes asked. "No," Tav said slowly. "They're waiting for us. They know we can't leave a Ravager fleet this close to Coalition space. We have to attack. And when we do, they'll fight with everything they have left. One last desperate push." Brooks looked at Lina, and in that moment they both understood. The Ravagers weren't baiting a trap. They were offering a final battle. Win or lose, this fleet would be eliminated, but they'd take as many Coalition forces with them as they could. "Recall the recon team," Lina said. "We need to prepare." The Coalition assembled the largest fleet it had fielded since the war began. 40 warships, 100 support vessels, and 15,000 ground troops ready for boarding actions. The humans wanted to fight. The coalition wanted to end this. For once, their goals aligned perfectly. The battle began at dawn, coalition time. Warships approached in formation, while human assault craft prepared to board disabled Ravager vessels. The plan was simple: overwhelm the starving enemy, destroy their capability to fight, and end this threat permanently. But the Ravagers had one final surprise. As coalition ships entered weapons range, the Ravager fleet suddenly powered up, not to fight but to ram. They accelerated toward the coalition line like missiles, engines burning at full power despite the damage it caused to their own systems. "Evasive maneuvers," Sarev shouted, but 3 coalition ships couldn't avoid the collision. Ravager vessels slammed into them at relativistic speeds, explosions lighting up the void. "All ships open fire," Brooks commanded. "Take them down before they can build momentum." The space battle became chaos. Ravagers threw themselves at coalition forces with suicidal determination. Human assault craft already launched found themselves in the middle of a ship-to-ship slugging match. Hayes led his team onto a Ravager cruiser that was actively ramming a coalition frigate, fighting through corridors while the ship shook itself apart. "This is insane," Kren shouted, firing at Ravagers that stumbled more than charged. They were starving, dying, but still fighting because that's what Ravagers did. "Welcome to Tuesday," Hayes shouted back. A human phrase Kren still didn't quite understand but had learned meant something like, "This is normal for us." They fought through 12 decks, destroying Ravager warriors who could barely lift their weapons. It wasn't a battle so much as an execution, and Kren hated it. These enemies deserved to die for what they'd done to coalition worlds, but there was no honor in killing beings who could barely stand. Hayes must have seen it on his face, because the human grabbed his shoulder between firefights. "I know," Hayes said, "but they won't surrender. They can't, it's not in their biology. So we do what we have to do." The battle lasted 8 hours. When it ended, the Ravager fleet was destroyed, every ship reduced to debris. Coalition casualties were heavy, 9 ships lost, 3,000 troops dead. But the Ravagers had committed everything to this last stand and lost. In the aftermath, Lina watched salvage teams pick through the wreckage. They found evidence of starvation, of Ravagers cannibalizing their own dead for resources, of a species that had expanded too fast and consumed too much. The coalition had been their last target and they'd failed. "Is it over?" she asked Brooks. "This fleet is finished," Brooks said. "But there are more out there. Smaller groups scattered across 100 systems. We've broken their back, but the tail still has teeth." That night, coalition and human troops gathered for a memorial service. 15,000 voices spoke the names of the dead, both species honoring their fallen in their own ways. Hayes and Kren stood together, and when Hayes started singing a human mourning song, Kren joined in, his translator rendering the words into something beautiful despite the language barrier. Lina watched and recorded everything. The coalition had asked for soldiers and received teachers. They'd feared the humans would be too violent, too aggressive, too alien. Instead, the humans had shown them something the coalition had forgotten: that strength and compassion weren't opposites, that warriors could be gentle, that fighting for survival didn't mean abandoning what made survival worth it. The war wasn't over, but they'd won the battle that mattered, the one that proved the coalition could stand beside humanity and become something greater than either species alone. They'd lost ships and lives, but they'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that they could face any threat as long as they faced it together. Hayes found her after the service, looking tired but satisfied. "You did good recruiting us," he said. "I recruited you to fight," Lina replied. "Yeah, but we're not just fighting. We're teaching your people they can fight. That's worth more than any battle." Lina thought about that, about coalition troops who stood taller now, who laughed in the face of danger, who'd learned courage from Deathworlders. "I think we're teaching each other," she said finally. "You're learning that survival isn't just about strength." Hayes smiled. "What else is there? Wisdom, patience, knowing when not to fight." She gestured at the memorial site. "You honor your dead. That's not just strength. That's civilization." "Maybe we're not so different after all," Hayes said. "Maybe," Lina agreed. "Or maybe that's the point. We're different, but we're learning from those differences. That's what the coalition was supposed to be about." She filed her report to the council that night, recommending formal military integration protocols, permanent human training positions, and cultural exchange programs. The war had changed the coalition forever. Lina just hoped they'd changed for the better. 6 months after the first human soldiers arrived, the coalition controlled more territory than it had in over a year. Smaller Ravager groups still operated across dozens of systems, but they were scattered, disorganized, running instead of attacking. The war wasn't over, but its character had fundamentally changed. Hunters had become the hunted. Lina walked through a reclaimed settlement on Veltros II, watching coalition civilians return to homes they'd abandoned months earlier. Children played in streets while adults began the slow work of rebuilding. Human soldiers helped with reconstruction, their strength useful for more than just warfare. She watched Hayes and Kren working together to clear rubble from a collapsed building. The humans' raw power combined with the Talvosi's careful precision. "You've gotten stronger," Hayes said to Kren as they lifted a support beam. "I've been eating human ration bars," Kren replied, mandibles clicking in what Lina had learned to recognize as humor. "I think they're changing my biology." Hayes laughed. That easy human sound that coalition species had learned meant pleasure rather than aggression. "Those things are terrible, but they keep you going." "Like humans," Kren said. "Terrible, but they keep you going." Hayes laughed harder and Lina smiled despite herself. 6 months ago, Kren would never have made a joke like that. Coalition troops didn't joke about serious things, but the humans had taught them that humor was a weapon against fear, that laughing at danger made it less powerful. General Brooks arrived 3 days later, with news that changed everything. Lina met her at the landing site, immediately recognizing the tension in the human's posture. "We found something," Brooks said without preamble. Reese's team was doing deep recon in the outer reach. They discovered a Ravager breeding facility. A big one. Lina felt her scales go cold. Breeding facilities were the source of new Ravager forces. Coalition intelligence had estimated there were dozens scattered across Ravager space, but they'd never located one. The facilities were mobile, heavily defended, and crucial to Ravager expansion. "How big?" she asked. "Big enough to produce 50,000 new Ravagers over the next standard year," Brooks said. "If we don't destroy it, everything we've accomplished means nothing. They'll rebuild, and we'll be back where we started." The strategy meeting that followed was tense. The breeding facility was located in a system called Outer Reach 7, deep in what had been Ravager territory. It was protected by automated defenses, patrol fleets, and the Ravager's most elite warrior caste. Getting close enough to destroy it would require a deep strike operation with minimal support, exactly the kind of mission that had killed entire coalition task forces before the humans arrived. "We can do it," Reese said with quiet confidence. His reconnaissance team had grown famous for accomplishing impossible missions. Troops called them the Ghost Squad, beings who moved through enemy territory like smoke. "We've been studying their defensive patterns for 3 weeks. There's a window about 4 hours during their shift rotation, when sensor coverage overlaps and creates blind spots. 4 hours to infiltrate, plant charges, and extract," Sorev said slowly. "Even with your team's capabilities, that's pushing the limits. That's why we need to go bigger," Brooks said. She pulled up a tactical display showing the Outer Reach 7 system. "Full strike force. 200 troops, mixed human and coalition. We hit them fast, overwhelm their defenses before they can respond, destroy the facility, and get out. 200 troops against an entire system," Drem said. He'd come to observe the planning, his forearms folded in obvious concern. "The risk is tremendous." "The risk of not doing it is worse," Brooks countered. "High Speaker, I understand your caution, but this is the target that ends the war. Not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually. We take out their ability to reproduce and the Ravagers become a footnote in history instead of an existential threat." Lina watched Drem consider this. The Mirren leader had changed over these months, but he was still fundamentally who he'd always been, someone who valued life, who saw war as a last resort, who wanted peace more than victory. "Do it," Drem said finally. "But bring them home, General. All of them." Brooks didn't make promises she couldn't keep, so she just nodded. The strike force assembled over the next week. Hayes volunteered immediately, as did Kren. Reese selected team members based on capability rather than species, creating squads that mixed human aggression with coalition precision. Morrow led one of the infiltration teams, his Quailith senses perfect for detecting enemy patrol patterns. Dr. Tav insisted on joining the medical team, despite his age and his species' physical limitations. "I've spent months treating human injuries," he said when Brooks questioned his decision. "I understand how they work now." "How they all work. You'll need someone who can treat both species under combat conditions." The journey to Outer Reach 7 took 3 days at maximum speed. Lena traveled with the strike force officially as an observer, but really because she couldn't let them go alone. These beings, human and coalition alike, had become more than soldiers to her. They were proof that the galaxy could be better than it had been. They arrived at the system's edge and immediately went to full stealth mode. The breeding facility was a massive organic structure, floating in orbit around a dead moon, surrounded by defensive satellites and patrol ships. Sensor readings showed thousands of Ravagers inside, including the elite warriors that made regular Ravagers look weak by comparison. "Remember the plan," Brooks said over the command channel. "Infiltration teams go in first, disable sensors and defenses. Assault teams follow, secure the perimeter. Demo teams plant the charges. We have 4 hours from first contact to detonation. After that, this whole system is going to know we're here." The infiltration began at midnight local time. Reese and Morrow led their teams through the sensor blind spots, moving with supernatural silence. Lena watched through their helmet cameras as they bypassed automated defenses, disabled communication relays, and opened holes in the facility's security network. "Perimeter secure," Reese reported after 90 minutes. "Assault teams, you're clear to approach." Hayes led the first assault team in, 60 soldiers moving through corridors that pulsed with organic life. The breeding facility was partly machine, partly living organism, grown rather than built. It smelled like death and birth simultaneously, and coalition troops fought against their instincts that screamed this place was wrong. They encountered the first elite Ravager warriors 20 minutes into the assault. These weren't the starving, desperate enemies from the recent battles. These were well-fed, perfectly coordinated killing machines that moved with terrifying speed. Hayes's team took them on in a corridor barely wide enough for 3 humans to stand abreast. The fight was brutal and fast, weapons firing at point-blank range, soldiers fighting with knives when their guns ran empty. Kren saved Hayes's life when a Ravager blade came within centimeters of the human's throat, the Talvosi's reflexes faster than any human's. "Thanks," Hayes gasped. "Now we're even," Kren replied, referencing a battle 3 months earlier where Hayes had pulled him from a collapsing bunker. The demolition teams reached the facility's core an hour later. It was a vast chamber filled with incubation pods, thousands of them, each containing a developing Ravager. The sight made Lena feel sick. These weren't enemy soldiers. These were unborn beings who'd never chosen to fight. "We have to destroy it," Dr. Tav said quietly beside her. He'd seen the same things she had. "I know how you feel, but if we don't, they'll grow up to consume more worlds, kill more civilians. Sometimes there are no good choices." The charges were set with 30 minutes to spare. The strike force began their extraction, fighting through Ravager warriors who'd finally realized they were under attack. The facility's alarms shrieked and reinforcements poured in from patrol ships. What had been a stealth operation became a running battle. 2 extraction shuttles were destroyed before they could launch. 40 soldiers found themselves stranded, fighting their way toward the remaining evacuation points while the countdown ticked toward detonation. Hayes's team was among them, pinned down by elite warriors who fought with the desperate knowledge that their entire breeding program was about to die. "We're not going to make it," Kren said, firing his rifle with mechanical precision while Hayes called for support that wouldn't arrive in time. "Yes, we are," Hayes said. "Because we're not leaving anyone behind. That's what humans do, remember? We're stubborn." Reese appeared out of nowhere, his ghost squad providing covering fire that gave the pinned soldiers time to move. Morrow threw smoke grenades that confused the Ravagers' visual targeting systems. The combined force fought their way toward the last shuttle, losing soldiers with every meter. Lena watched the timer reach 0 from the safety of the command ship. The breeding facility exploded in a flash of light that temporarily overwhelmed sensors. When the displays cleared, the structure was gone, reduced to debris that would drift through space forever. "Extraction shuttles report," Brooks commanded, her voice steady despite the tension Lena could see in her posture. One by one, the shuttles checked in. 4 survived. The last one carried Hayes, Kren, Reese, and Morrow, along with 16 other soldiers who'd fought their way out of hell. Final casualties, 43 dead, 72 wounded. Heavy losses. Terrible losses. But the mission succeeded. The breeding facility was destroyed, and the Ravagers' ability to rebuild their forces died with it. That night, the survivors held another memorial. 43 names spoken into the void. 43 lives honored by the beings they'd saved. Lina watched Hayes and Kren stand together, both injured, both alive, both changed by what they'd been through. "We did it," Kren said quietly. "Yeah," Hayes replied, "but it cost us." "Everything costs something," Kren said, and Lina heard the echo of human philosophy in the Talvosi's words. "The question is whether it's worth the price." Hayes looked at him and something passed between them, some understanding that transcended species. "It was worth it," Hayes said finally. Every one of them would say it was worth it. Lina believed him. The Coalition had asked for soldiers and received heroes, not because humans were naturally heroic, but because they'd taught everyone around them that heroism was a choice, that survival was worth fighting for, that the price of peace was sometimes paid in blood but always paid together. The war had changed the Coalition forever. Lina just hoped the galaxy was ready for what they'd become. The Coalition Council chamber looked different now. 8 months had passed since Lina first met General Brooks on that orbital station, and the war everyone thought would never end was finally over. Not because the Ravagers were extinct, but because they'd retreated to their core systems and requested peace negotiations. The galaxy's most aggressive species had learned the hard way that some prey fought back. Lina stood at her position in the chamber, promoted now to Admiral, watching as human and Coalition representatives filed in for the formal ceremony. Hayes walked beside Kren, both wearing dress uniforms that looked strange after months of combat gear. Reese and Morrow followed, the Ghost Squad famous now across Coalition space. General Brooks came last, moving with that predator grace that Lina no longer found frightening. High Speaker Dram opened the proceedings with a speech about sacrifice, cooperation, and the future. Lina half listened, her mind wandering to the statistics that told the real story. Human casualties over 8 months, 893 dead, 3,000 wounded. Coalition casualties fighting alongside humans, 2,000 dead versus the 10,000 they'd lost in the 6 months before Earth joined the war. Numbers that represented lives saved by Deathworlders who taught everyone else how to survive. Earth is granted full Coalition membership, Drem announced, and the chamber erupted in sounds that each species made for approval, and with that membership comes a seat on this council, a voice in galactic governance, and our eternal gratitude for saving us when we couldn't save ourselves. Brooks accepted the honor with a short speech that made Lina smile. Humans weren't much for ceremony. They preferred action to words, doing to discussing. But Brooks understood the importance of this moment, so she spoke about shared sacrifice, mutual respect, and building a future together. The real ceremony happened afterward when Brooks, Hayes, Reese, and a dozen other human soldiers received the Coalition's highest military honor. Lina presented them personally, clasping hands with beings who'd become friends despite coming from a world that should have killed her in minutes. "You changed everything," she told Brooks quietly. "We just fought," Brooks replied. "You're the ones who learned how to fight back." "That's not true," Lina said. "Before you came, we were dying slowly, retreating step by step, losing hope. You taught us that survival isn't about avoiding danger, it's about facing danger together." Brooks smiled, that human expression that showed teeth but meant warmth. "We learned from you too. Coalition troops taught us patience, precision, long-term thinking. My people are good at surviving, but your people are good at living. There's a difference." The celebration that followed mixed human and Coalition traditions in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Hayes taught Kren a human dance that involved complicated footwork and laughing at mistakes. Morrow told a Quilith story about ancient warriors while Reese listened with genuine interest. Dr. Tav and human medics compared notes on treating injuries across species lines, building medical knowledge that would save lives for generations. Lina found Sorev standing alone, watching the festivities with his compound eyes reflecting the lights. The Talvosi commander had changed more than anyone, standing straight where he used to hunch, speaking firmly where he used to hesitate. "What are you thinking?" Lina asked. "That we almost lost everything," Sorev said. "Not just the war. Our identity. Who we were as a coalition. We were so afraid of violence that we forgot violence has its place. The humans reminded us. They did more than that, Lena said. They showed us that warriors can be gentle, that strength doesn't require cruelty, that fighting for survival doesn't mean abandoning compassion. Will we stay like this? Sorev asked. Or will we go back to who we were? We can't go back, Lena said. We're different now. The question is whether we're better. She got her answer the next day when coalition military academies announced new training programs developed jointly with human instructors. Not to make coalition soldiers into humans, but to teach them human lessons about courage, adaptation, and refusing to accept defeat. Applications flooded in immediately. Young coalition beings who'd grown up hearing stories about the human soldiers and wanted to learn from them. Kren was one of the first accepted into the new officer training program on Talvos III. Hayes volunteered to stay as an instructor, turning down a promotion that would have sent him back to Earth. They'd become something rare in the galaxy, true friends across species lines, bound by shared combat but sustained by mutual respect. I'll miss the fighting, Hayes joked when Lena visited their training facility a month later. No, you won't, Kren replied, clicking his mandibles in humor. You'll miss having someone to save your life every other day. That too, Hayes admitted. He looked at Lena seriously. You know this is permanent, right? Humans don't quit on friends. We're part of the coalition now, which means we're with you for whatever comes next. I know, Lena said. That's what concerns some council members. They're grateful for what you did, but they're also afraid. You're very good at violence even when you're trying not to be. Violence is a tool, Hayes said. It's not who we are. The coalition will figure that out eventually. Some already have, Lena said, thinking of the joint patrols, the mixed military units, the cultural exchanges happening across coalition space. Others will take time. The Ravager peace negotiations concluded 3 months later. The terms were harsh but fair. The Ravagers would remain in their core systems, would cease all expansionist activities, and would allow coalition observers to ensure compliance. In exchange, the coalition wouldn't hunt them to extinction. Some council members argued for harsher terms, but Brooks spoke against it. Peace is better than victory, she said during the debate. We fought to survive, not to conquer. If the Ravagers stay in their space and leave us in ours, that's a win. Drem supported her position and the treaty passed. The war was officially over. Lena stood on the observation deck of Unity's Hope 1 year after first meeting the humans, watching ships move through space in patterns that represented the new galactic order. Human vessels mixed with coalition craft. Joint crews working together on everything from exploration to defense. The galaxy had changed, and she'd been there to see it happen. Brooks joined her, moving silently as humans did. Any regrets? The general asked. Every day, Lena admitted. We brought Deathworlders into our space and they changed us. Some for the better, some in ways we're still figuring out. But we're alive. We're growing. We're learning. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Brooks said. The coalition was dying because it forgot how to fight. But you also forgot that fighting isn't just about winning. It's about protecting what matters. What matters to humans? Lena asked. Brooks smiled. Each other. Our friends. Our pack, as you called it. We're not complicated beings. We survive together or not at all. The coalition just forgot that lesson. We reminded you. They watched the ships maneuver, human and coalition crews learning from each other, building something neither species could have created alone. Somewhere out there, Hayes taught Talvosi soldiers how to be brave. Morrow led Quilith scouts using human tactics with coalition precision. Dr. Tav published research that would revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. What now? Lena asked. Now? Brooks gestured at the stars beyond the viewport. Now we explore together. The galaxy's a big place, and we've only seen a fraction of it. There are more threats out there, more mysteries, more challenges. But this time, when we face them, we'll face them together. Coalition and humans. Just call us allies, Brooks said. Partners. Friends. The details don't matter as much as the commitment. Your people learned to fight. My people learned to think before fighting. Together we're stronger than the sum of our parts. And if another crisis comes? Lena asked, though she already knew the answer. Then the galaxy has something it never had before, Brooks said with that predator smile that meant protection rather than threat. It has humans who've learned wisdom from the Coalition, and Coalition beings who've learned courage from humans. I'd pity whatever comes next, Lina believed her. The Coalition had been dying when she'd traveled to Earth, desperate and afraid, hoping for a miracle. They'd received something better. Teachers who happened to be warriors, friends who happened to be Deathworlders, allies who'd shown them that survival was just the beginning of what they could become. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Building a future where different species didn't just coexist but thrived together. Where strength and wisdom weren't opposites but partners. Where the galaxy's most peaceful civilizations could stand beside its most dangerous predators and call them family. High Speaker Drem found them an hour later, his forearms gesturing with animation. We've received a distress signal from a previously uncontacted species in Sector 412. They're facing some kind of plague, requesting medical and humanitarian assistance. Lina and Brooks exchanged glances, and something passed between them. Understanding, commitment, purpose. Assemble a response team, Lina said. Mixed Coalition and human personnel, medical specialists, security forces, cultural liaisons. We'll leave within the day. Just like that? Drem asked. We know nothing about these beings, their capabilities, their intentions. They need help, Brooks said simply. That's all we need to know. The Coalition helps those who need it. That's what you've always done. We're just making sure you can keep doing it. Drem's arms settled into a position Lina recognized as satisfaction. Together? Always together, Lina confirmed. That's the lesson, isn't it? Separately, we're just species trying to survive. Together, we're something greater. The Coalition asked for reinforcements and received Deathworlders. But those Deathworlders became friends, teachers, and partners. They changed us and we changed them. Now we face the future as something neither species could have been alone. Brooks nodded. The galaxy's waiting. Let's show it what the Coalition can really do. They departed Unity's Hope 3 hours later. A fleet of mixed ships carrying humans and Coalition beings toward a new crisis, a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove that different species could build something better together. The war had taught them how to survive. Now they'd learn how to thrive. Lina watched the stars stream past the viewport during faster-than-light travel, thinking about everything that had changed. The Coalition that had been timid was now bold. The humans who'd been violent had learned restraint. Together, they'd saved each other and discovered that salvation came not from being the same, but from respecting their differences. Hayes would say they'd just done what needed doing. Kren would add that courage was a choice. Reese would remind everyone that survival meant adapting. And Brooks would smile that predator smile and say they were just getting started. They were probably all right. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers the Coalition couldn't imagine yet, but now they had something they'd never had before. Deathworlders who'd learned to value life and life-loving beings who'd learned to fight for what they valued. The future was uncertain, as futures always were. But for the first time in a long time, Lina faced that uncertainty with hope instead of fear. They'd survived the war. Now they'd build the peace. Together. Because that's what families did, whether they were born on gentle worlds or death worlds that tried to kill them every day. They survived together, learned together, and built futures that honored the sacrifices of those who'd come before. The Coalition had wanted reinforcements. They'd gotten something far better. Partners who would stand with them through whatever came next. And in a galaxy full of dangers and wonders, that made all the difference.